deliver speech-language therapy to children with autism and other developmental challenges and/or delays by using our patented methodology in conjunction with AI and VR technologies. I'm talking to you about a major health equity gap in America. Did you know that the largest provider of pediatric speech therapy in our country is our public school system? And for every 100,000 children in the United States K through 12 schools, up to 11,000 of them require speech-language therapy. Putting this into perspective, there are over 6 million school children that require intervention annually. NIH studies show that out of all these kids in need, only 55.2% of these kids who require intervention receive any care whatsoever. That means that 44.8%, or roughly 2.85 million kids, receive literally zero care. That's absurd. And for those lucky ones that do get care, they're getting group therapy in groups of 4 or 5 or more children at the same time. Highlighting this, LAUSD, the second largest school system in the country, has only one therapist or assistant for every 200 kids that have a need. We just do not have enough qualified people to deliver the therapy that we need. Outside of the schools, insurance providers will approve 12 sessions annually at a cost of about $200 per session. With such little therapy, it's nearly impossible to make an impact on these people's lives, forcing them to seek outside solutions that are inaccessible and unaffordable. Now, you might be thinking, like I used to, isn't speech therapy used to treat a stutter or a lisp? Well, yes. However, it covers so much more than that. Speech-language therapy touches on all modalities of developmental learning, such as areas like fluency, language, speech, pragmatics, cognition, swallowing, and many, many more functions. This therapy is used for many cases, including to help children with autism, Down syndrome, and adults with aphasia, or rehabilitation for those who suffer from stroke or other traumatic brain injuries. The end goal is to allow one to become as independent as possible. The limitations of speech-language therapy include lack of carryover skills in the therapy room, which is a controlled setting for the real-world application. In many cases, this happens as a result of not bringing them to the school play yard or bathroom depending on the activity. Further studies show that it takes an average of 2,000 repetitions to learn a new skill. And for every 30 to 60 minute one-to-one therapy session, you get approximately 25 to 50 reps respectively. Thus, over the course of 12 sessions, you've received enough therapy to achieve approximately 15 to 30% of the reps needed to develop one single new skill. So what can be done about it? Have no fear, guys. Vizq's here. Help has arrived. By utilizing our AI-driven platform, Vizq AI, delivered in VR, we are able to bridge the gap and provide therapy in real-world settings, guided by an AI therapist providing one-to-one therapy. We will be able to teach new skills by using our patented methodology of escalating and de-escalating prompting, or, put another way, increasing levels of reward and consequence. So, for a more digestible image, imagine that you're teaching a child to ride a bike, and you put this child on a balance bike. After a little bit of practice, you move them to training wheels. After more practice, after more effort, you slowly take off one wheel at a time. Eventually, this child is now able to ride the bike completely on their own without any assistance. So, how big is our market? There are currently more than 28 million people in the United States diagnosed with a need for speech-language pathology. Of that population, almost 6.5 million of them are school-age children in public schools today. The vast majority of these children receive significantly less therapy than needed, while 44.8%, or just over 2.8 million of them, of these school-age children receive literally no care at all. These children clearly need help, and we are here to step in. Upon completion of development and all necessary regulatory and otherwise steps, we will roll out to the market in a very strategic manner. First, we will serve the 6.5 million students in public and charter schools. From there, we will expand to the 6.9 million acquiring care through private practice clinicians, hospitals, and other medical care via reimbursement with insurance providers, reducing costs to these providers by as much as 89%. After that, we will move into the 8.2 million individual students in the private users market. Now you might be, while the speech market is highly fragmented, sorry about that, with competitors touching on pieces of the greater problem, none of them are able to provide a true holistic solution. This is where we are able to lap the competition. Our solution creates a full-service, scalable virtual environment to deliver one-to-one quality therapy in order to truly impact the lives of these children. Now you might be asking, why us? This team was designed to compete in the health tech space, which requires a combination of clinical, technical, and commercial mindsets. From Benjamin Alba, my CEO and co-founder, who has ran and created multiple outpatient clinics, to my CIO, co-founder, and inventor, John Mina, who has been a practicing speech-language pathologist for more than a decade, to myself, president and co-founder, who has been a dynamic entrepreneur who has been fortunate enough to span several industries and create several exits along the way. In addition to our founding team, we also have a talented group of advisors who support our efforts and bring diversity of thought, background, and resources to the table. With this in mind, Vizq has put together the right team to make a real impact. We are seeking a capital injection of $250,000. This money will be used to fund the development of our prototype, obtain initial market feedback, obtain our 510(k) filing, set up legal and other structure operations, and allow us to go for our next round of funding after achieving those steps. Let's work together to provide accessible speech therapy to the world. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions?
Alex,
Yes.
So are you in the prototype stage where you have some of these developed and you're testing them with people?
So where we are right now is we have developed out our wireframe. We are now raising money to be able to build this prototype out. With that said, we have actually been able to use the wireframe along with my co-founder and speech-language pathologist, John Mina, and a third-party therapist to validate his data. We've been able to test this in LAUSD, one of the largest public schools in the country, on 38 children. And we had a 38 out of 38 kids success rate on the methodology. So our next step is to build it out in a VR environment. Does anybody else have any questions that I can answer?
How are you finding early adopters?
So early adopters for us, what we've done is we did a lot of market research to talk to special educators, administrators, clinicians, and parents of these children to understand what it is that they need. And in doing so, we found that there are two major ways where we can roll out to the market almost immediately. So schools, being the #1 provider, have something called an IEP, or an individualized education plan. And each kid is given a certain amount of minutes per week, per month, per year that they're supposed to fulfill for this IEP. And they're given dollars in order to cover this. Well, in most cases, these IEPs are not being fulfilled. And so what happens is, these kids, because there's just too much of a bottleneck and not enough clinicians for the amount of kids that need help, in most cases what happens is these kids don't get them fulfilled. What happens in turn from that is the state says, okay, you need less funding dollars because you must not need as much therapy as we thought you needed. That's how they interpret that. And so what this will do is allow them to be able to give more therapy at the same time, because if they put, for example, all the kids in group therapy in the same room, each one with an Oculus on, and they're all getting a one-to-one session, they're all getting their full reps, which means they can all fulfill their IEP, helping the school essentially pay for itself by keeping their IEP dollars. For private clinicians, it's an easy win for them because the back end of the system is A, going to reduce their non-billable hours by doing all their charting and paperwork for them. B, it's going to work in conjunction with them, not replace them. So what we do not do is we do not replace the once-a-month diagnosis or review session. We don't diagnose, we don't review every month. We replace the 8 to 16 follow-up sessions a month per child. So as a result, since your most reimbursable session and or billable session as a therapist is that once-a-month diagnosis session, you can help more children. We can solve the bottleneck. You can make it more affordable for those children, and at the same time, you can constantly make more money by charging your most billable session. Can I answer for you, Joe?
Can we go into a little bit of talk about the AI? And I don't really know about your algorithm, but what is it supposed to be accomplished? What is the AI supposed to be accomplished?
So the AI it's going to be a personal automated teacher is what we call it, PAT. And this AI is going to be in the actual game. So imagine that we are sitting in a one-to-one therapy session in real life. Well, now I want you to imagine that I'm an AI therapist in the game right in front of you instead. And I'm actually interacting with you and guiding you and teaching you using the same reward consequence methodology that every teacher in America uses.
So how does the clinician kind of interact with that? Do they have any say on what happens on a macro level? Or are they just kind of reviewing things and saying, and it seems to me like you see you're not doing, you're not, I forget what you said, what you're not doing, but it seems to me like you are doing that just by the nature of what the AI is working with. And
So we are not replacing the need for the therapist. By working in conjunction with them, we're replacing the follow-up sessions. We still need them for the once-a-month review and diagnosis. So we're a team here in that.
I guess that's my question, is when the clinician goes diagnosis, we have, this is going on, can they go to the AI and say, we need this worked out?
Can you direct it?
Do they direct what's going to be happening then?
So I mean, very honestly, the first thing I'll say is there will be multiple iterations of this product. But that being said, our initial plan with that is there will be certain courses set that you'll be able to choose between, different tracks, and the therapist will guide which track you choose. There will also be, not just with the reporting and paperwork and charting that's created, it will also have a screen mirroring function, so that the therapist will be able to go in and see how the child's doing, or a parent will, if they want to see, even though they won't be able to actually interact as a player in the game, they'll be able to see where their frustrations are and see what the problems may be. In addition to that, the idea is when they do have that once-a-month review session, they will be able to see, okay, so little Johnny did great with A, B, and C, and E and F, but D, he struggled at step 1. He couldn't get past step 1 with D. Okay, so now we know, let's call D brushing your teeth. All right, so now we know at that once-a-month review session that when he sits down with little Johnny and him should work on brushing their teeth outside of the application to see where the barrier is, because that allows the therapist to also work with them, and each month can make different recommendations to if there's a track that they want us to go towards.
I just think that, and I'm sorry, I'm monopolizing time here, it seems to me that you'll get more adoption the more that the therapists feel like they have, that it's a dialogue between them and the technology.
They can direct it.
Yeah. That's just,
No, I think you're right, and I think that's one of the big things about as we roll this out and as we get clinician feedback, as we get special education feedback, as we get the feedback from the parents and even the children themselves, we can only learn. And so one big thing about what we want to do here is we have been actively working to meet parents, special educators, all these people I've been naming, because it's so important that we work with them to build this as a product that's truly going to help. And that means that as we do future iterations, that feedback might be something that gets developed either in phase 1 and phase 2, but it will be something that eventually we will need.
Yeah. Do you have data on how well these children do with VR?
So there are some universities doing studies currently about children in VR and also special education and/or children with autism in VR. They are seeing actually that these children are willing and wanting to play these games and be in the system. Now I won't tell you that a 12-month-old is excited to be in VR because I don't know that their head can hold it up yet. We don't have the feasibility studies on that. But that's why our focus right now is school-age children. Eventually we will span to adults, geriatrics, and if possible, even if it means maybe vertically integrating and building our own hardware one day, we will eventually want to help infants, but it's a process.
The other thing if children are working inside VR, the therapist in the VR, is there a way for the speech pathologist who's in charge of this to have an avatar that looks like them?
No.
Have you thought about that?
Actually, we don't want to do that because at the end of the day, that creates the same bottleneck we have right now. If you have to enter the game, then you can't have 30 kids using it at the same time. You can't have 5 kids using it at the same time. You can only have 1 kid using it.
No, I was just thinking that, the therapist in VR is the same for all the children, right?
Yes.
The deal would be that the avatar might bear some resemblance to the pathologist.
Okay. I see. I'm sorry. I misinterpreted your question.
Yeah.
So from a skin perspective, yes, we do intend to either in the MVP or in phase 2. We're still working that out. But we do intend to both allow the children, as they for example, brushing their teeth is one of the activities. As they see themselves in the mirror, 1, we want them to be able to at least be similar to themselves, so it resonates. And 2, we will eventually, want to roll out skinning the actual therapist. It's a terrible way to phrase that answer.
Yeah, it does.
There's more than one way to do it.
Yes, sir.
This is just feedback on your pitch deck. If you look at that, the text at the bottom in the dark blue is unreadable.
Yeah.
And on your page of our team, you use that for every single person. I could not read who they were or what their qualifications were.
No, that's great feedback. So that is the blue hyperlink text, and we will have to modify that and make it a brighter and easier to read color.
Yeah. And if it's hyperlinked, that's very good. It probably works great on a computer, but
Yeah, I mean, so like for example, the names underneath us on the YS page, they all link straight to our LinkedIn profiles, things like that. But again, that's great feedback because it doesn't have to stay blue.
well, and nobody in a pitch room like this is going to be linking to your LinkedIn. They're going to look at what you have on the screen and what you're saying.
No, that's a very fair point. I appreciate that.
The other thing is that you spent a lot of time talking about the pain, and coming to the solution could have come a little faster. Because you can always go back to the pain and then why this is a solution, and then there's this pain, and then yes, it's still a solution. But get to the wow factor a little faster.
So I've been actually trying to figure out the right secret sauce for that for some time. I'd love some feedback on that. Long story short, we know that there are a lot of people that don't know things. Like for example, most people don't know that speech language therapy is more than your A's, B's, your Lisps. That is a common misconception. And so one of those things that we kind of wrestle with internally is how much education is too much versus how much is not enough. Because if we don't educate you properly, you don't realize how broad this and how big this market really is. But on the other hand, we also, you're right, we need to find a way to get to the solution faster and, you know, kind of bring it home.
I mean, just in that instance right there, that could be part of your solution. I mean, that could be, and you know, you might not know this, but this, you know, we're doing this, you know, we're doing this, here's our solution, blah, blah, blah. And you might not know this because, you know, speech therapy is not just this, it's this, and we will deal with all of that. So it's actually part of you can make it part of your solution, not part of the problem.
Interesting, okay.
And it's more about common communication. And children with speech pathology don't link into the common way we communicate. So this is a solution to that.
Okay.
It's about communication, it's about how to receive it as well as how to give it.
Okay. Yes, Christian?
I mean, it's interesting that it seems like the product is really based around visual, but you're solving an auditory problem. Can you talk a little bit about that? Just like,
So speech language therapy covers a number of modalities from tactile to visual to auditory, and more than that, to be honest. So with that being said, the big reason why we want it in the virtual environment is for two elements. First, the scalability of being able to actually solve the bottleneck, because teletherapy and group therapy are not solving it right now. Number two is because one of the other big complaints beyond affordability and accessibility, which is huge in itself and the biggest bottlenecks there are, there's also an issue with carryover skills. And so what happens is a lot of children end up, you know, learning in a controlled environment, say the therapy room, or even like a room like this, maybe a little smaller ideally, but still, and they learn to brush their teeth. Well, now they can't carry that over to an actual bathroom setting. They don't understand that grasp, or that transference. And so, that being said, what we want to do is say, okay, if you're going to learn to brush your teeth, you're going to learn in a bathroom environment. And I will say, when we did our testing, using our wireframe and our methodology, one of the activities that we used was a bathroom brushing teeth. And even though it was 2D and we had my therapist there coaching it, we had a parent actually on their own provide a testimonial after the fact that their child, when they got home from school that day, immediately went straight to their house, went straight to the bathroom and started brushing his teeth over and over.
Oh,
Yes, sir?
maybe I just don't understand the hardware enough. Most of the time I see a game, you're playing a game using some command or joystick or the motion of your head. Your device will have a way to capture, because I think in speech therapy, you're like, well, Johnny, say this, and then Johnny says this, and then you'll have a way to capture that speech so that the AI can say, hey, that was great, or hey, can you try again?
Yes, and so the beautiful thing about the hardware is Oculus has already actually designed that functionality. So we are eventually, there may be a vertical integration, we may build our own, but that's years down the road. For right now, we're gonna play it safe and use the guys that already have it and have it warranted and all of those fun things. But I guess with that said, there are new haptic gloves that are coming out, and Oculus is releasing, so that way for those kids that have more severe needs, they won't have to use the joysticks. They'll be able to put on gloves much like those thin gloves you wear in the winter that you can touch your phone with still.
Right.
Same difference, but they will work actually, and the VR will be able to pick them up and with the sensors in them. Yes.
Another thing, benefit. You can talk about how this system will dramatically increase the productivity of a speech pathologist because school districts are looking at money, and you can say the average speech pathologist school salary is X, and this is what their productivity is now. With the addition of this, the productivity really expands. Anything that saves money or improves productivity is something that people are willing to invest in.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you for your presentation. It's Alex, right?
Yes, it is.
Forgive me, my ADD is raging this morning.
Hey, I know the feeling.
So it's gamification and it's efficiencies. That's what we're talking about as far as benefits over your competition. Is that correct?
Essentially, yeah, yes. So what it's gamifying it is efficiency, but it's also there is nobody currently that has created this solution. There is nobody in the market that has a virtual environment to deliver speech language therapy. The only current solutions in the market besides traditional one-to-one therapy are group therapy, which if you really think about it, let's say you put 4 or 5 kids in a room, you have a 30-minute session. Instead of each kid getting a 30-minute direct session, which is what they're supposed to get, each kid is getting 6 to 7.5 minutes in a perfect world with no transition time from kid to kid. The other problem is teletherapy. Well, if we don't have enough therapists to do one-to-one, and all teletherapy does is allow you to reduce the commute time, and we have that big of a bottleneck that it doesn't solve it, we still have a major problem. So there is no current solution on the market that is truly able to help these children.
Great, thank you. And just one follow-up, and I'll be done. Is there a story, is there a hook as far as why you guys started this business?
So for
Other than the demand in the market?
I get it. So for each one of us, there's a little bit of a different story behind that. And so for Benjamin Albaum, my CEO, he's ran 3 outpatient clinics, and he has helped hundreds, if not more, kids through this, and he's seen the bottlenecks, and he's seen the clinicians going crazy, and how the kids can't get help, and all the parents that called him over and over, and he didn't know how to help them because he couldn't find enough clinicians to service them. That was the biggest problem with his outpatient clinic, is he couldn't grow it beyond he couldn't grow it beyond around just over 8 figures in revenue, because once he hit a certain point, he ran out of speech language pathologists to hire. And so all his parents were calling, and he couldn't solve the bottleneck, and he felt that pain as a parent himself. John Mina has been a practicing speech language pathologist for 10 years, and he came up with this methodology. He just saw it as, bottom line, there needs to be a better way to teach these kids, and a better way to really reach them all. For me personally, I grew up with a cousin with autism. I used to go over to her house and help her quite a bit. She's one of the people that means most to me in this entire world. And so every time I think of a hard day, or every time that we have a challenge, or we have a late night, like even last night up till probably 3 or 4 in the morning, I just think of her, and I have all the motivation I could possibly need.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex.
I have one more question. Can you, I may have missed this, but can you talk a little bit about I'm trying to understand your IP a little bit more, and then also, do you see like a future where actually the therapist is completely cut out and it really just the program and AI?
No, I do not, and I think that's intentional. Do I think it's possible to do that? Sure, but I don't think it's the right move. I think at the end of the day, the idea of our program is it's the culmination of thought of multiple speech language pathologists, eventually hire the best people in the field is the goal. And so it will ultimately be like therapy 2.0, it's better than any one individual session. However, even though we can give you a better setting, so there's the carryover still gaps, even though we can make it more affordable, and even though we can make it the culmination of thought and a higher quality, there is nothing to substitute the idea of a human interaction just to make sure that these kids are still getting the attention and the individualized focus that they deserve. And so what we want to do is we don't ever want to replace them. We want to work in conjunction and continue to develop with them, not to replace them.
So if this gets on the Oculus store, would only like a certified speech pathologist be able to purchase it for their things, or can parents actually just purchase it?
So initially, schools and therapists have to refer you to it. Schools can buy it themselves for the children. Their insurers can buy it. Therapists don't pay for it for the kids. The kids pay for it themselves, but the therapists have to refer you.
So you're not looking to get on the Oculus store?
Eventually, when we get to the point of individual users market, we will consider it, but still there will be a barrier of if you don't have a diagnosis, you won't be buying this product. Now, on the flip side, it is also important to realize that our IP spans all developmental learning and our methodology throughout AI and VR. So eventually we may expand beyond this, but our full and narrow focus for right now is speech language pathology and for the children in public school age. I'm sorry, I missed your question.
When you get your investment, how long do you think it would be before you would have a prototype that a patient could use?
A prototype for testing or an MVP?
Either.
So a prototype for testing, 3 to 4 months after I get this investment and I will have it developed and it'll be starting for the 510K filing. From an MVP perspective, we are several raises away and several development rounds away. Ultimately, as a medical device, we have a longer journey than a traditional commercializable product. And it is important to recognize that in order to truly bring something that would be serviceable for the community, it would not need to be one activity or 3 or 5 to prove a concept. It would need to be a catalog of probably closer to 40 to 60 activities just to get them started while we're continuing to build from there.
Well, thank you very much.